Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Family Writing Journey. I'm Michael.
I'm Sunny.
And I'm Matthew.
We're a dad, a mom, and a teenage son. We each recently took up fiction writing. We're definitely not experts, but we hope you'll enjoy hearing about our journey and maybe get inspired to start your own. Welcome to episode number 2. Today we'll be talking about writing habits.
Writing habits is a term that can include when you write, where, how often, how long, and we're also going to delve into some other topics such as how we keep track of our writing, our methods for staying motivated, and a couple more questions.
All writers have different writing habits, as you would expect, and there are lots of really good resources out there if you want to hear advice and best practice. We are not trying to be experts, but we are sharing with you what we know about writing habits from our own experience. So we're going to start off, I think, today by talking a little bit about just like the basics. Where do we write? What kind of technology do we use when we write?
I'll start. I used really poor technology. I had Sonny's old laptop that wasn't working very well. So I started writing with Google Docs, and that's I don't know if you call that software, but anyway, that's the platform that I use to write on. So Google Docs, I was using a laptop, and now I have switched to using the desktop because the laptop faded and died.
So did you do anything by hand, or everything you've done is on the computer?
Yeah, everything's on the computer. All of my writing is on the computer. If I'm listening to feedback from someone else, I've done some of that by hand to look at later on my own. But yeah, all my writing's on the computer in a Google Doc.
Yeah, and I think we've all used Google Docs a little bit, and it is nice because you can share it with each other pretty easily, and you can see comments and edit in real time and all that. I don't know, Matthew, have you done anything where you've used any handwriting?
Not really. I've done a little bit of outlining, handwritten, but mostly I use Google Docs, just like my dad, for the main writing.
I've just started, like literally in this last week, I put a little notebook by the side of my bed because I've done all mine also with Google Docs, and honestly, I can't imagine writing longhand.
It's just too much slower.
It's too much slower, and it's too hard to make changes. But what I did find is I tend to be one of those people that like lies in bed at night and worries about things, but sometimes thinks about creative things too. So sometimes if I think of something and I'm there in bed, I don't have my laptop in my room. So I've started keeping a little notebook by the side of my bed, which is like a new thing for me to just kind of jot down ideas. So I don't know if anyone's ever had like an idea notebook.
I have a similar thing. I just keep it on like a note on my phone where I write down sort of random ideas that I have at 2 a.m. And most of them turn out to not be very good, but a couple of them are interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I don't relate to either of those things. I don't think at night. brain sort of turns
it's
off
not always
easily.
Good. Sometimes you wake up in the morning and you read it. Matthew has
You're
said
like, what does this
too.
even mean? Yeah.
I drive a lot in the day, and I'll sometimes think of things driving, but obviously I'm just going to hope that I remember them rather than
self-driving cars.
Someday, yeah, not yet.
But then you can write your ideas as you drive.
Would actually be awesome for me. I drive a lot, so I would save a ton of time.
So Michael said that he writes either physically at the desk here at the house, or you used to sometimes write on the laptop.
Yeah, I know you guys both use laptops. Matthew, you're in your room, and Sunny, you're in the room too.
Yeah, I'm a little flexible. I mean, I have written in different places, and I don't really feel like I have a set place, but I tend to like my bedroom because it's quiet, and when I'm up there, I feel like I don't feel like I have to be doing other things that I would feel like I needed to do if I were like downstairs or at the desk or at work or whatever.
Yeah, so our setup is we have just a sort of communal desk in our living area. And that's where I write, even though people are sometimes around. Doesn't really bother me too much. I'm able to tune people out.
Yeah, I need the solitude, so I just stay up in my room at my personal desk and right there. I think that's basically the only place that I really write consistently.
And I remember a little while back, we all read some parts of Stephen King's famous book that's called On Writing. And he talks about that idea of like having a designated space as like an important writing habit.
Yeah, and just sort of sitting there can maybe get your writing juices flowing.
Mm-hmm. And it's kind of like, okay, now I'm at my writing space, so now I'm going to write.
Right.
Yeah.
So what about when we all write?
I don't have a set time when I write. I just sort of write randomly whenever I find the time, which I would say I have a lot of time being a mostly unemployed high school student, but it just sort of fluctuates throughout my day sort of randomly.
Do you feel like you're more focused or more creative at like one certain time of day versus another?
I'm not good like immediately in the mornings. Like I know you guys, I think, prefer writing in the mornings, but that's not really my ideal time. I've tried writing like late at night, which can sometimes be really, really good, but it's sort of harder to find the motivation at like 11 p.m.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I guess like I was saying that sometimes I think about ideas when I'm in bed at night, but also sometimes I wake up and first thing in the morning, if I don't have to go to work or whatever that day, then sometimes my ideas are kind of flowing then. And so if I don't have work or other things to do, my preference is to write first thing in the morning.
Yeah, for me, I don't really have that option usually, right? So if I'm working in the day, I'll get home, do the minor things that you have to do, the little chores you have to do when you get home, have dinner. And then I like to get some writing done if I'm going to do it that night before it gets late, before I get too tired. On the weekends, I like morning writing, but not first thing. I'm big into exercising in the morning. So like first thing, I like to get the exercise going first. So weekdays and weekends. So I wake up really early. I wake up around 5 and exercise. And I thought about before work writing, but I think exercise is more important for me right now. So I try to get the writing in at other times. And I don't know about writing that early and first thing before work. I think that would feel rushed, and I had a timeline.
Yeah, when I know that I have to finish writing by a certain time, it's hard for me to start writing at all because it feels weird.
So none of us really have like a set time that we write. So I guess none of us are quite treating it like a lot of the advice says, if you really want to write, then you've got to make it like a set thing that you do, and preferably in a certain place and maybe even at a certain time. But none of us are obviously anywhere close to being.
But I think the main thing there is just the consistency of not necessarily a certain time, but just writing fairly often, like a couple times a week, maybe.
Yeah. So when you are writing, how often do you write?
It depends really. Like if I'm specifically like working on a project, I will generally write a lot, like 5 days a week. With editing, it's a little harder because it's less fun. So I might drop down to like 3 times a week.
I haven't been as disciplined or structured, I think, as either of you. So I've never set a goal for myself of like a certain number of days a week or a certain number of words. I've just kind of gone with the flow of when it feels fun. And I think as a result, I've probably written less than both of you, less frequently and less words.
Yeah, well, you guys started before me, but yeah, I would agree with that. I set it up. If I'm going to write 5 days a week, then I write 5 days a week, and I'll do that for a month. And each month I'll start a new goal of how many days I'm going to write. And I don't give myself any word limit or amount of time that I'm going to write. If I'm going to write that day, in my mind, I sort of think it at least has to be half an hour. It always ends up being more than that. So for the writing,
really disciplined. I mean,
yeah, I'm disciplined.
I admire how disciplined you are about actually just getting it going. And that's one of the big things when you read about, real writers talk about writing habits. They talk about, you got to read and you got to write. You just got to write. And I was reading this thing today. I'm reading this brand new book from the Mystery Writers of America. And it has this great quote from the mystery writer Harlan Coben. And it says, you can fix bad pages. You can't fix no pages. So,
right.
Which is good. And I think, Michael, you're like the poster child of that. Like, just write, just get stuff down.
Yeah, not that I
The back
write.
pages or-
I don't mean that in a bad way, in a good way.
Yeah, I certainly don't write a ton, but I write as much as I say that I'm going to write. I'll always hit my mark, whatever it is.
Yeah. So some other things that Matthew, mentioned, I think we've talked about some of them in terms of writing habits. I don't know if you guys feel like there are things that you do that work well, or vice versa, habits that you have that you'd like to improve or change.
I think the consistency is really my main thing to work on. Like, I don't always write like my dad. I don't do what he does, where he's able to make a goal and stick to it with how often he writes. And I could easily write every day if I could just find maybe the motivation or the routine to be able to do it.
So what stops you from doing it? Well, I know you said
Well,
motivation.
this isn't a therapy session, but like, yeah, a combination of things, just a lack of motivation in general, I think.
Do you think there's something about like the way you structured your writing that could make it more motivating?
Well, it's mostly just more motivating when I'm having more fun with it.
Mhm.
Like, the editing is harder to do because it's less fun. When I'm actually like in the middle of writing and I'm feeling good about the story, then it works better. But if I get down on my story a little bit, it can be harder to keep going with it.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, I'm on board with that too. I've actually for a while now been in the editing process, and that is a bit of a chore. Although sort of, right, it's also you can also waste your time, fixing commas and punctuation and things like that. So that's not a bad way to get into it if you're having a little trouble motivating for your editing. Just get in there, do some basic stuff, and then you'll start finding bigger things to work on.
If you tell yourself you're just going to do some small thing, you might actually end up doing more.
Yeah, little mind games.
That's like they say, just go to the gym and tell yourself you're only going to have to stay for 5 minutes. But then once you're there, then you kind of want to continue. So, Michael, did you have other things that are either things that work well or things you wish you did better in terms of habits?
Yeah, I mean, even though I always do what I say I'm going to do, I don't always set it up. Like this month, I set up for writing 3 days a week or writing or editing 3 days a week. And I'll do that. But that goal is obviously not too lofty. I don't know. Looking at word counts has been interesting. Again, I'm editing now, so I haven't been doing it lately. But when I first started, the word count thing was like sort of motivating to see how many words you've done, and to want to hit a big number, or, a round number, to round things off to like 1,000 or 2,000 or 3,000 words.
That's certainly, like, keeping track of words and stuff is certainly something that I do a lot of. It has its pros and cons for sure, but I guess I'm the sort of person, like, I want to see exactly, like, I keep track. I've got a little app in my phone where I can put down, I wrote 1,312 words today or whatever. And that sort of can keep me accountable. Like, I look back and see how much I've written this week, and it's like, okay, I got to do a little more next week, or I can tone it down because I'm doing pretty well.
And I'll just say, because part of the reason that we're doing this whole podcast is because this is a kind of a family thing, and this is our little writing club. And especially when I first got started at the end of last year, and Matthew was writing pretty consistently, the whole word count thing got me kind of intrigued, because I have a little bit of a competitiveness streak. And so if Matthew came downstairs and said, "Oh, guess what, Mom? I wrote 1,500 words."
Right.
Then that would give you a little bit of a motivator. So if you like to have a really concrete, more quantifiable way of keeping track of things, then I think the word count can be kind of a fun way to do it, rather than just saying, "I'm going to sit down and write for an hour."
Although I think the word count thing can be helpful sometimes, but I also was speculating that it might sort of, if you are like me and sort of start thinking about, like, oh, so this chapter is going to be this long and this section is going to be this long, and the whole book is going to be how many words it's going to be. And that can sort of cause you to, like, oh, okay, it'll take me 10 more days to finish the book. And that can force you to sort of rush things, which I think has been a problem with my book, although I couldn't really say if that's the root cause of it or not.
Yeah, and I don't know if I've written enough to have those feelings and enough thoughts on how that would work for me. I really haven't written that much in the end because I started later than you guys.
Yeah, Matthew's right though. I not just with word count, but I found that if I let myself get focused on how many words are in a chapter or how many chapters are in the book or how many words are in the book, like it can be, I think you said it well already, it can be sort of a pro and a con. And I think a lot of what we're talking about is like how different habits work for different people and kind of knowing yourself and what will motivate you versus what might tend to, become a roadblock for you. And I think ultimately we want to focus on, like, as our little mini writing group, how we keep it fun. So how we can have some structure and some good writing habits, but also, keep the writing really just as a fun and creative thing that we all kind of like to do as a family.
Yeah, and I would say it would be really hard to keep it fun writing on your own. Matter of fact, I think for me it would sort of be impossible. I don't think I really could. I mean, I'm motivated, so I would do it, but it wouldn't, the fun would certainly not be there if it wasn't for the fact that we're together, and even forgetting the podcast, but just in the evening when we're not doing anything, that one of us will just be interested in something that they wrote or we're thinking about, and then we'll just start a conversation, and that will keep us all interested in writing. And one of us will say something that makes the other one think about their own book. And I don't know, that has been really enjoyable. I can't imagine what it would be like to write like solid. I mean, we write alone, but
it's still sort of a group experience when we can talk about it and share our work with each other.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, I'm nodding in case you don't see that on the podcast.
Which is really like the reason we started the podcast. I mean, we were already sort of sitting around in the evenings talking about our books, talking about writing, and it sort of seemed natural, like, oh, just set up a mic, and now we're talking about it, on a podcast.
Yes, we are. Well, I think that's kind of wrapping up our discussion for writing habits. These are fun to talk about. And like we said at the beginning, there's lots of stuff you can read if you want to hear how real writers structure their writing and all the good strategies that people use. But I think Michael just said it a minute ago. It's kind of an evolving process. It's different for each person. And it also evolves over time as your writing changes and as you get other ideas from other people. So that wraps us up for today.
Yeah, we'll be back next week. Thanks for joining us today, and good luck with your own writing journey.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.